Okay, so want to welcome Mike and Oscar with us. Many of you have seen Oscar or seen Mike in previous episodes, but Oscar is new to our session. So Oscar, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your history, and then we'll kind of march down through what we've done together.
My history. So my history starts degree in applied science back in 1986, food tech, of which I've used little since. Really got into what we're doing now in 2000, about 2000, 2003, there's a group of us built a cherry packing plant, 6 of us, in central New South Wales, which is where I'm from. And that got me back into manufacturing, and it sort of, I guess, continuous improvement intersected with that, with my role in operations management. That a cherry packing plant was a financial disaster, and a disaster in a couple of other areas, primarily because of a drought. Australia had a really bad drought, 2006, 7, 8, and even though we had California variety cherries, they didn't do well, and we just didn't have the product coming in, so things went south as far as that was concerned. But what I did discover through that was it allowed me to spend 3 months in operations trying some continuous improvement things, and then realising that some of this stuff that we were doing can apply, can help others apply some of those things. 2009, read an article about TWI, training within industry, never heard of it. Contacted the institute in America, came over to a conference in Vegas in 2010 with my business partner Ben, and things have grown from there with in terms of association with the institute TWI. And I guess what we realised was that we were very much missing what we were doing prior. We were missing how to bring frontline leadership along for the ride, if you like. What we were told by the brand who makes Yellowtail, that winery's 20 minutes from home, is that we do a good job at the factory level. They were paying the bills, but the middle management were getting left behind, and they said you need to find something. And about that time is when I read the article about TWI that I'd never heard of. So really from that point, we had the institute came over, and a master trainer did three times he came over and did sessions with us to get us started. And then our learning has really been, when I look back, our learning from then has been learned by doing. When I look back, we were pretty green when he left in 2011, and we're still green, and in some respects we'll always be green. I hope I never stop learning with this stuff. But I think we're a little less green than we were back then. And then it's evolved more from just TWI into what we call the step-up reference model, and which is all-encompassing, long story, but really that pulls in a number of other frontline leader skills that if they're not in place in a people-centric environment, then probably this stuff, the essential things aren't going to stick, or you're going to find it hard to make it stick.
So you mentioned TWI several times, and I don't think we've talked about that yet any of the sessions we've had, and it's certainly part of the story way. So for those folks out there that don't really know what that means, what is TWI? Where did it come from? What does it try to do with folks and for folks?
No problem. So what is it? It's a program of routines. It's a group of routines that develop critical countermeasure skills to problems that frontline leaders are going to run into every day of the week. Those 3 problems tend to be don't know, can't do, does know, can do, but isn't doing, or too hard to do. So the TWI program is a set of routines that supervisors can use to develop skills as countermeasures for those. So that's what it is. Why is it important? Because every organisation we've ever struck, manufacturing, service, construction, whatever you want to like, whatever you want to choose, well, the frontline leaders will be striking those problems, if you like, every day of the week. So you need those countermeasure skills. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways to develop those countermeasure skills, but we found that the training within industry routines are a pretty robust way of developing those skills. Where did it come from? It started it was developed, if you like, the routines came to life during the Second World War, developed by the War and Manpower Commission on your side of the world, as a response to I guess it all was triggered by Pearl Harbor and you guys getting pulled into the war, and therefore manpower was taken out of the factories and deployed on the front line, and that left the factories devoid of workers, and they had to produce bombs and bullets and guns and planes and all that stuff. So the factories became staffed by women and farm labourers who had never worked in that environment before, and quality and productivity and safety dropped. So the War and Manpower Commission developed a very robust program to recover those and get things back on track. And people may argue that was, 80 years ago. The fundamentals of leadership have not changed. So they still stand true today.
And I think it's interesting, the logo for it during the war was Rosie the Riveter. So we were bringing women into the manufacturing process. And once we won the war, everybody came back and we decided we were good. And I've always thought that it probably got put in a trunk right next to that trunk they show at the end of the first Indiana Jones movie where they had the Lost Ark, and it probably got stacked up right about next to that and left there until a couple Americans took it to Japan, and all of a sudden, and within less than a decade, turned Japan's quality issues around to the point that they became world-class competitors. And it's just now beginning to come back and infect the U.S. as if it's something new. I find that ironic.
Yeah, it was unbeknownst to the rest of the world. I don't know about America, but in the 60s and early 70s, product out of Japan was referred to in Australia as Jap crap. That changed really quickly. And it was really the Toyota Corolla. I don't know if that was a model that came over here, but it was the Toyota Corolla. All of a sudden, people thought, hang on, this is a good car and it lasts and it doesn't break down. And so, the Western world went back to find out how this had happened, and it wasn't the only thing. But one of the things that was discovered was these skills of particularly leadership and instructing were well embedded. How did that happen? Thanks to you guys and teaching the Japanese TWI.
So let's go back to how you two met. So Mike, why don't you recount because there's another story of then how I got drawn into that group.
Well, I had seen Oscar, and I think probably your partner, at a couple. I think you guys were at the very first Toyota, weren't you?
No, not the first. Second, maybe.
Second, or
certainly third, but
I
not
remember
first.
seeing you guys that sort of set off to the side, and I didn't really know what that had to do with Kotakon, because I assumed Kotakon was Kotakon, and you were sort of a tag.
That might have been San Diego.
Yeah,
potentially.
Well, then there was a conference in Savannah that Pat had problems getting into and missed a dinner, but then we went to a couple sessions that day, and on the second full day, he had a flight out at 12:30 or 1 or something out of Atlanta or out of Savannah, and I had seen you had said something. You had been talking something when you were on stage in the opening, and I knew you had a session going on that afternoon that, as I recall, was upstairs. And I sat in on that session, and as I've told Pat, after about 15 minutes, I realized this was something we probably what we were doing here needed to have that and be pulled into it. And we chatted briefly, and then at the next session, which was, I think, in Atlanta, was it?
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
There was one in Atlanta.
Or was it Austin?
That was Austin. Atlanta was the first one that I went to, and then Savannah, and then Austin. Yep.
I saw you early in the morning and said, I'm going to set up a lunch to where you can join us, but you got to meet Pat, and you can take it from there.
Well, I've said this to a few people, and I said it to one last week. I was with Cambridge Air last week at Chesterfield, Missouri, and I said it to them. And so we sat down for lunch, and within probably 2 minutes of talking to Pat, I thought, I want to work with these guys because of the people side.
Yeah, and so my side of that story is I thought it was completely happenstance that you happened to sit down and went, man, so within 2 minutes, so I'd seen you speak a little bit, and in Savannah I saw you did a session, and it dawned on me that the improvement routine or the kata routine from Rothard and JR was the way to systematically grow people in their careers, to do career development, in addition to some other things. But we'd been searching for something like that, and we had systems, but it was more inconsistent. But to me, that was a way that we could have it be done fairly consistently across the whole company. And so
the other thing that appealed to me, I remember quite clearly, because is not what usually happens, is that I think it was you, Mike, who said, how would you like to come and practice this stuff that you do with story construction? And I said, I'd love to. But what really appealed to me, so many times people will say to us, well, what do you know about construction? And my response to that is, I don't know anything, but why would you want another expert in the field that you are experts in? That's no point. It's probably better for you if I'm not an expert in whatever field you're in. And so that appealed to me straight off too. One of the criteria for me working with story construction was that I didn't need to be an expert in construction. Too many times people say, well, what do you know? And while you've got to be familiar with it and be able to adapt and speak the lingo, speak the language to a certain degree, it's something I've never understood. Why, with people like me, customers tend to want to bring in people who already know their industry. To me, that would possibly be counterproductive.
Well, I think the construction industry, particularly at the lower echelon of the organizations, are very, very skeptical of anybody who tries to talk to them or about the business if they don't have some sort of a history of construction. And that was one of the things that I had the sense that you would have the ability to overcome, because what you were talking about had nothing to do with how we pound nails. It had to do with how we solve problems or teach people how to do things or whatever those things were.
How we work with people who pound nails.
And it was happening at about the same time that Pat and I had gone to a couple Shingo Institute conferences, and we were really beginning to realize that we had to have, besides the production system that had been developed, the production system was going to die a slow death if we didn't have a supporting culture.
Sure.
And if we didn't have the techniques with which we could continuously improve. And so Shingo, Kata, and TWI sort of got pulled into what was CP 2.0 and gradually became known as the Story Way, which was a significant upgrade, because now we were talking enterprise-wide, not just project-centric.
Actually, I've got a question related to all this. The story construction website, which I refer to frequently, again did it last week, is not what you'd expect, because it opens up. It's not the first line, if you like, is not about construction. When did that change? Was that when we met, as a matter of interest? Was that already was that thinking already there, or was that in the last 3 or 4 years?
So
the people side.
The guy you can't see on camera, everybody, is Mitch Anderson, who leads our marketing efforts. He could probably answer the question when we actually changed the website. For a really, really long time, we've been people-centric. Building because people matter has been.
That's been there a long time.
Okay. So exactly how that's been presented. Honestly, I don't go to our website a lot. I refer people, but it has become more prominent. I'll say over the last 5-6 years, and quite frankly, Mitch's presence here has helped make that much more robust. We just had dedicated staff who's had an interest and done good work with that.
Okay, fair enough. I get a lot of value from it because I open and I did it last week. Here's their website. What do you expect to see? Oh, and people sort of stand back. And I say to them, that is exactly what it's like.
You
So
know,
it's
and
not
quite
just
frankly,
words.
there was a time when a very good friend of mine and I were working both here and at a place down in Wichita. And it got to the point where we realized we couldn't both keep going to the same place all the time. And I began to think about it, and he said, well, I really get along with those guys down in Wichita. And that was about the time I realized that the only place that I thought we had a legitimate chance of making the production system take root and become just the way we do things was here, because of the perspective of this organization is as free from fear of any organization I'd been around, and I knew we had to have that environment in which to be successful.
Yeah, have a chance.
And I pretty much began to focus on that, because the one thing I wanted to make sure that I was involved with was getting it into the organization to where it became second nature. And then the culture came after that. But stories, since the very first time we met, the guys that preceded Pat and Mike and the rest of the leadership team now, it was the same focus on people and integrity and caring and being planful and so on. So this is not something that came out of the Story Way. This was how the Story Way was succeeded.
The key words, the key 3 words I would jump on there is free from fear. I'd love to know maybe that's not a topic for now, but that's important. It's just so important, and I'd love to know where that came from and how that evolved.
We might get there toward the end of this, but so Mike, we haven't really spent much time with this, but you talked about some Shingo conferences that the two of us went to, and I guess I want you to touch on maybe the first one and kind of how that struck you, or how it struck us, quite frankly, but how that struck you, and what was it about that was it content, or was it environment, or both, that said, hey, this is something that can be useful for what we're doing?
Well, I got very interested in Shingo and Shingo's involvement within Toyota, because he was essentially an organizational guy that was a very close consultant to Engineer Ono, and brought with him some principles that he had developed, and brought the ability to do things like the SMED, or the single minute exchange of dies kind of thing, because they knew they were going to have to. So I was familiar with him, and then somehow I came across the Shingo Institute, which is located in Utah, at Utah State, I think, and began to look at that and downloaded some of their information, and I realized that it was going to be much easier to begin to discuss culture if there was a framework that described it to some degree. And Shingo had 10 guiding principles with diagrams that showed how they supported operations and how operations should be driven to encourage that kind of behavior. And so I hadn't seen any of their stuff, and we found a workshop going on out in Massachusetts. And Pat and I got there, and it was a place that made logo-centric handouts, like they would customize shirts or backpacks or cups, and so it had absolutely nothing to do with construction. And we sat through the first part of that workshop, and were given a very good overview of the principles and how you grow a culture around it. And it all sounded kind of California fern bar hoopla to me. And when we walked out onto the floor, and I remember I walked over to Pat and I said, you can feel this. You can feel, this feels totally different here. And there was a lady there that had a group of 6 downline foremen.
It was almost 40 people, I think, ultimately. Yeah. Yep.
And I started talking with her, and she told us when she started, all they would allow her to do was open boxes with a box cutter because she spoke no English. And then told how they helped her grow to the point that she was was in charge of some 40 people. And I said, well, have you ever heard of Toyota Kata? And she said, oh, come look at our latest Kata experiment. And was on the verge of tears describing the love she had for that organization and all the people that worked for her. And it didn't matter what workstation you went to, you were hearing exactly the same things. And it gives me goosebumps right now thinking about what we saw. And I think we're still a long ways away from that here, but I think anybody coming into a story project from a CP 1.0 environment would feel the same kinds of things that we felt there, because it is different. I mean, it was night and day. You literally could, it wasn't something you could smell or touch, but you could feel it as you walked across the shop floors. And then we went to a second one, and it was the same way. And we began to realize, I think there's something to this.
Yeah, the thing that that I was heartened by as we went to Katacon, as we went to Shingo, is we started. We were discovering things here. We were figuring things out, some stuff around culture, but the words that we were coming up with, that we were discovering, were the same words that we were hearing as we would go to those places and talk to the people who were there. And so it became, hey, we don't have to discover everything ourselves. And so we got more involved, and so I want to get to the next kind of major piece. So we have lunch. We're going to get you engaged with another concept I want you to talk to you about, because then we're going to talk about the story of when COVID happened, and we're doing our thing remotely from 15,000 miles away. So talk to us a little bit about work standards, how you became exposed to that ultimately, what it is, and then kind of the work that we've done here so far.
Okay. So I'll start with how did I get exposed to it. So 2019, actually 18 and 19, the Institute organised a trip to Japan in each of those years, the TWI Institute here in the States. The first, and it was to spend time with Aseo Kato, who was Ono's HR advisor through the 60s, 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s. The first trip was quite engineering based from what I understood, and that not quite me, so I didn't get involved in that. The second trip was less detail, higher level, a bit more of the theory, if you like. And really what I was intrigued, my mission, if you like, in going on that trip was pretty straightforward. There are 3 terms that are thrown around in the world, the standardisation world, the lean world, of which I'm part and sometimes guilty of being part. But those 3 terms are work standards, standard work, and standardised work are the 3 terms. And there's much confusion and much greyness around those 3 terms. And I don't know if it's not the word you use in this country, but in our country you call it Chinese whispers, where you get told one thing, pass it through 10, and what gets out the other side of the 10.
We call that the telephone game.
The telephone game. So I think that's what had happened. So one of my key drivers was to go there and get those 3 definitions from as close as I could get to the horse's mouth. And so we got those, and the way he gave them, and I haven't got them here in front of me to read them, and I think it's important that I do, so I won't. But fundamentally, work standards describe the environment necessary to produce quality for the customer. Standard work brings human movement into it and motion, and standardised work is when those 2 get put together, they're identified, are being taught, and are being followed explicitly. So when I saw those 3 definitions, that makes some sense. While we were there, also saw two, or might have been when I got back and started to look on the internet about this stuff. It's all over the internet. Cato's one of his key statements is that without work standards, you'll never get to standardised work. And I thought, what's the background? Why is he saying it? And he gave us a table while we were there that had essentially, it was a reference table, 5 step-ups. And we had been tending to start our work with training people. That was on row 2 of that document he gave us. So I'm thinking, hang on, we're starting there, but he's got something before that. So that was another thought. Then I saw the Mark Rosenthal Lean Thinker statement, what we've now called the red poster statement, which essentially says if you have it's very hard to progress anywhere if 2 people can look at the same thing and come to different interpretation. I then walked into a winery, not the Yellowtail winery, another one close to home, and there was 2 supervisors doing at a shift change. They weren't arguing, but it was close, for looking at an end product and having a robust discussion, let's say, about whether that end product was actually in spec. And I thought, interesting discussion. I looked at the specification, or the standard, if you like, and it was very red postery. It was completely open to interpretation, and that was when the penny dropped. I thought, hang on, that's what Cato's talking about. That's what Mark Rosenthal's on about with the red poster. This is why Cato, maybe that's why he's saying without work standards we'll never get anywhere, because it's open to opinion and interpretation. So we started work with and then I guess what's also an important part of this is that in the material Cato gave us is quite a complex model of work standards, which I don't know if you've ever seen, actually, Pat or Mike. But when I looked at that, I thought, I'm sure that makes sense, but how do you get people started in that? And then I thought of the Mike Rother story, and he became very aware of scientific thinking within Toyota. And there was plenty of books about it already. It was in the Harvard Business Review in 1999 and all this sort of stuff. So that wasn't new. But what he did was he thought, well, how can we develop a routine? We need a routine or a pattern that people can follow to start to get them to embrace. So I guess I did the same thing. I thought, well, that's complex, that model, if you like, the work standards model that Cato gave us. And I went through, I thought, if people are going to get started with this, they need a routine. So we started with a routine and learned by doing. We started with that winery. You guys were part of it via Live Online in late December 2020, I think we did that, at Ames High. You were building the Ames High. And as I said last week, that was one of our focus points with Cambridge Air last week, and it's still evolving. This morning, I adjusted that pocket card. Something happened last week. I thought that could be clearer, so I've adjusted the pocket card, the routine, if you like, further. But really, my learning has come through the triggers of Cato's triggers, if you like, and then applying the principles that we learned in that week through a practice routine and modifying that as we go and learning at the same pace that a lot of organisations we've worked with have also learned. That's the backstory.
We use a phrase in the leadership course that we teach, that Pat and I teach, and it's something that I actually saw some of it in an insurance ad, and I don't think they had any idea the power of what they had in that ad. But the concept is adopt it as it's defined by whoever came up with it, learn from that, and then adapt it to where it fits your organization and continue to improve that to where eventually that becomes not only part of your culture, but it becomes a powerful part of how you do business. And I think that is happening with TWI and with work standards with you, and certainly with Shingo. The last thing we wanted to do was just take Shingo's 10 principles and say these are now story principles, because those principles should reflect who you really are and what you really do, sort of like core values. And so over the course of 2 years, we've now come up with 8 guiding principles that are sort of held up as examples as to how our people should behave in certain circumstances, like, for example, seek perfection or lead with humility or grow trust through making promises. And the same thing is happening with what's, I see the same thing happening with with work standards, and that model, that step-up model made totally perfect sense to me the first time I saw it. And as I've shared with you and the good doctor, the red poster, green poster made it was such a simplistic idea that I think because of its simplicity, we have failed to realize how powerful it is.
Possibly, yeah. And it is from a conceptual point of view, from a conceptual angle, it would be the most, what would be the word? The easiest communicated concept that I've struck in the last 20 years. Yeah. And people get it like that and can give you examples like that. So it's very relatable. And once we understand and accept a concept, then it opens the door for what can we do about it.
So I'll give you a story about what we can do about it, because I think it brings together a bunch of things. So we talked a little bit earlier about building because people matter, and that one of the fundamental outcomes we're seeking from CP 2.0 is for the craftsperson to have a good day every day. And those are all awesome things, and they're ambiguous about, well, so how do you do that? You've got to tangibly do something to actually get that to be accomplished. But that was the outcome we were seeking. For a number of years, I'll say in 2000, 2021, 22, we were having, and probably even a little bit 23, we were having too many safety incidents. Thankfully, nothing was overly serious, but every incident you have has the opportunity to be serious. And I'm talking about stuff with our own craft staff. And we did a study of that and found that a common denominator to all of those was either something had changed in the plan for the day, or the guys weren't exactly sure what they were going to be doing that day after they left the trailer. And so I said, okay, how do we just create a standard? We want to be sure that our people know what they're supposed to do before they go to work. Because with accidents, you usually need 3 or 4 things to come together to kind of have an accident. If we could take one of those away, maybe we could reduce the frequency. So, and Oscar, you'd given us, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but you'll correct me. It's to master the tiniest item of the highest significant, that can have the highest impact. But what's the right verbiage there?
Master the tiniest item of the highest importance to get the greatest result. Comes from Toyota talent, Leica and Meyer.
And so we have a routine by which we start and end the day with our crews, and that routine has continued to evolve and is pretty solid. But here a couple of years ago, we put in one last step to where the foreman or the superintendent would ask each of the crew members what their individual assignment was for today. So what's your assignment for the day today, Mike? What's your assignment, Oscar, for today? And to have them repeat that back to us. One, just make sure that are the conversations we're having actually getting the information to the individuals about what they need to do. But the second thing is to take away the factor of we don't know what we're doing, and which increases the likelihood of an accident. Since we've done that, it's been about 2 years now, we've had one accident. And that one accident, something changed in the middle of the day. It was last February. The guys are working inside. It's bitterly cold. A shipment of windows comes to the site, and unexpectedly, nobody expected that. And the helpfulness of our folks, they went out there and unloaded the trailer, didn't have the proper hand protection, and we got some frostbite. So the thing that I do enjoy about work standards is there's a nice routine to create them, but we're not curing cancer here. We're just simply trying to look at those things that can have impact, and they tend to be smaller. And so it is not these overarching, takes 12 years to figure it out in these complex systems. It's fairly simple, basic stuff that can have immediate impacts for folks. And so that process, the other thing it's done is it's gotten us to get a lot of people involved.
I think you've pulled in something important, and it really, you can have participant guides and pocket cards and all that other stuff, but at the end of the day, it's the aim is to create the right conversations with the right people about the right thing. And if the routine does that, then that is actually the goal. The right conversations with the right people about the right thing, because that's when the learning and collaboration, and that's when it really happens, if you like.
So, Mike, we might use that at the next Storyway leadership class. That was well said. But ultimately, CP 2.0 and Ultra Storyway is how do we create the right conversations? And it's not about what's posted on the board. It's not about what's on the pocket card. But are we having the dialogue that's necessary to put people in a position to have success?
So I'll give you an example of that. Last week with Cambridge Air, they make heating and cooling systems. Going through the routine of developing work standards, and they were reasonable. They'd got to the second draft or whatever, which I would say 70 or 80%. And I said, have you actually? The card had said, talk with the internal customer, but I knew they'd skipped it. Who did you do this with? And they'd skipped it. So they then went and reviewed what they'd come up with the guy who actually receives this package just before it gets put on the pallet to go out in the truck. He's the internal customer. They came back and they had a very different perspective about one particular aspect of that pack. And I said, there's the example. Follow the routine. It's not about the routine, it's about the conversation you just had with the internal customer. Now you both understand the detail of this particular output, and the chances are, even if you do nothing else, don't write it down anywhere. The fact that you've had that conversation, the chances of ticking the box each time has just gone up.
So we did I think the first in-person one we did up in Cedar Falls with the group there, and we've then you were the means by which you would facilitate work standards. And after about 18 months of that, I got, you do a really good job, but man, coming over a couple times a year, this is going to take forever. And so the next trip, you actually had a session where you provided training to our 6 facilitators, and we can kind of do it ourselves. About that same time then, we started to introduce job relations, and in the last year or so started with job instruction. So just I remember a conversation I had because I had a dilemma. Do we start with job relations first or job instructions first? And I had some feelings, but I didn't know. And your suggestion was, I think I've known us, start with job relations, and we have. And so just talk about what each of those routines are, and then we're going to circle back to Mike. So
once you have standards in place, as I said right at the start of the discussion, essentially the frontline leader is going to come up against two things. One of those two things is don't know, can't do. The other thing they're going to come up against is the person knows and can do, but they're not. So the first one, don't know, can't do, the countermeasure skill is instructing. The TWI, and I'm sure there are others, but the TWI routine to develop the skill of instructing is job instruction. The other one, does know, can do, but isn't. The countermeasure skill to that is leadership. The word leader by definition implies you have people following. If they're know and can, but they're not, well, they're not following. So in my world, our world, the TWI countermeasure, the routine to develop that countermeasure skill is job relations. But there's another important aspect to this, and job relations has two sides to it. One is the reactive side, which is what I just spoke about, but the other is the proactive side, being the 4 foundations of job relations. Both sides practiced effectively will build trust, cooperation and feedback. And none of this stuff that all of us are talking about in the last 50 minutes will click and stick if we don't have trust, cooperation and feedback. So not always, but we encourage organisations to consider that bit first. Not first and then wait, but do that. Start practicing those skills in parallel, because, as I said, particularly without trust, Dave Hyam, who Pat knows quite well. Have you met Dave? Dave Hyam from Boeing, ex-Boeing vice president.
I don't think so. The guy from Boeing that I know was Mark Rosenthal. But
Yeah, right. Okay, Dave. So basically, Dave in a webinar in 2018 said, people won't. If people don't trust you, essentially he said, if people don't trust your intent, they won't follow you. So therefore, if we're doing this stuff with whatever it is we're doing, work standards, whatever else, if there's not trust in intent, if there's not trust, then it's going to be tough to get people to follow. So we 9 times out of 10 encourage people to get their head around and start practicing the job relations routine pretty early on, as that will practiced well and practiced continually. It'll build trust, cooperation and feedback. And we're not going to get far without those. We certainly won't sustain without those.
So we've now had with your visit this week, I think will be about 80 folks who have been through job relations, and it has been impactful for us. And Mike just talked about the insurance company with adopt, learn, adapt, and improve, and our guys have done that with the job relations card. That one of our superintendents, Luke, made the observation that both the foundations and the problem handling routine. I said handling there. Did you get that? Lesson solving.
And routine.
Yes.
Not method.
Right. Didn't have something that specifically had that supervisor, that leader, reflecting on how they had contributed to the situations. And so we made a storized addition or edit to the card that I think has been good for us.
It was implied, but it wasn't clear, and it was important to be made clear. I really love that idea that Luke came up with. So, Mike,
you've known us for 30 years now, and kind of give us kind of stand back over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years as we've gotten to know Oscar and added some of these other elements to what we were working on. Because how do you see stuff tying together? What's been the impact? What's still the untapped opportunities and potential? And I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Well, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, I think one of the things that has happened, and it was one of the frustrations I had when I started getting involved with both Toyota Kata and TWI, and particularly Shingo, was that when you would go to one of those sessions, whether it was a Kata session or a TWI session or Shingo pick one, the focus of that session was always on the topic of the day, as if it was the most important thing that you had to do, and if you didn't do that, you were in trouble. You were going to, and so it was almost like early on in my career, what safety was. Safety was something that somebody else came out to the project to do, and it was a special topic, and it was something that every now and then we would talk about, but it wasn't anything that affected the project on a day-to-day basis. And what's begun to happen here now is the thread of Shingo, the thread of TWI, the thread of Kata, and the routines, as well as Shingo, are being woven into it. It's like being in a mill where now they're being woven into a fabric that is a unique fabric made up of a whole bunch of threads that are being used in a specific, in a way that is in harmony, all of them in harmony with all of the others. And I think it's incredibly unique. I quite frankly have had a couple opportunities to do some things with some other companies lately, and 20 minutes into the conversation, I think to myself, I am too old and ugly and don't have near the energy to ever try to create this, to help guide this again, because I could see 15 years of dog years to overcome the kinds of fear and command and control and things that have impacted our industry. My guess is since the pyramids. And I think that is that is the thing that is long term going to be the big payout. It isn't going to be any one thing. It's the way the organization deals with stuff in a way that it is woven into the way people work, and it's incredibly unique, I think.
So what's your big picture perspective?
Big picture perspective. Now, this is made on the basis that I come here twice a year for 2 weeks.
Granted.
So that's a 12th of the year, and you see them much more frequently. What I sense, and we spoke about this, is there's still, not in every, well, perhaps in everything, but there's still Carter hasn't gone beyond Carter, if you like. So Carter is the routine you practice to develop scientific thinking. I think it's still stuck in I think it's viewed as a method, potentially, and it hasn't gone beyond it hasn't fulfilled its potential in terms of thinking scientifically, and particularly the aspect of running a workplace experiment. Mm-hmm. I think there's some opportunity. I think there's some further gains to be made there, some real gains. And 3 weeks ago, I was at an organisation in Tennessee, big organisation, bakery company, and we were practicing workplace experimenting. And they have a big CI group and all the rest of it. And at the end of I could see the look on their faces when they went out and they'd come up with a workplace experiment and they went out. And I could see the enthusiasm on their faces. And one of the people came back and he said, I've worked in this organisation for X number of years, a long time in a CI role. And he said, I haven't had that much fun in a day like I've just had now. But it was but the point was it wasn't random, it was controlled. And I think there's a real opportunity there. In terms of the job instruction and in the instructing world and what that's going to look like in construction, because everything we do is unique. And if I don't mind, I've said that, I don't know if the camera's on, but I've said that with inverted commas and a bit of a wobble, because I think sometimes that's a bit of an excuse.
What is absolutely an excuse?
I think there's some paths to cross in terms of that.
Yeah, we're midstream in this journey, and
I think this will be the second or third time we've done JI. So this third. So we're very early days, but culturally, I think that's going to be a challenge. Getting traction there culturally will present some challenges.
So I think we're embarking.
We'll be using JR quite a bit.
Yeah. So when we deployed the system 11 years ago, we were specific about who we started with, Rob and Valerie, because they would say, "Oh, that's what you want. Oh, okay. We'll okay." And then as we went to everybody, there were some people who, this isn't for me. Well, we didn't have the JR routine to help us with that. It's not that we were completely ignorant to how we might work through stuff, but we're now embarking on taking that systematicness and the routines of planning, particularly, and observation, down to the next level of leadership in our organization, to the foreman. And so we need to anticipate that we're going to see similar kinds of, some people are all in and some people, I'm not sure about this. And so I think we're better equipped to manage that or lead through that because of what we've experienced and some of the systems and the routines we have today. But it's going to be, we're prepared to embark on that. But that's the only where we're going to get to, and the instruction routine will be helpful in that, but it will also be putting pressure on the people their lives are changing quite a little bit.
It's a bit different.
And I think that's what I was trying to get to when I was talking about this fabric. When we get to the point that we are expecting to have work methods, or what TWI calls job methods, happening at the crew level, crew-centric, that is project-centric, that is nobody coming out there to sort of help lead a Kaizen event, but where it is just the way we do things. There's going to be a need, I promise you, for JR. There's going to be a need for JI. There's going to be a need for step up. There's going to be a need for all of those things. And the good thing is those things are at least in the library now that we can pull in.
Absolutely.
And accelerate the speed with which we can make that stuff happen, because there are guys like Matt Ramenschneider that can go out there and help address a JR issue that otherwise a conventional project superintendent in the rest of the world right now would probably not do a very good job with.
Well said. Yep. So the other thing that is I find remarkable is 11 years ago we were embarking on something, and although we had some vague idea of what, maybe Mike, you had more certain an idea what it might be, I absolutely had no idea it would have evolved to this. The speed is increasing. So over the next 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, I don't think we even have a sense of what it can be if we continue to nurture it and feed it, because it's impactful to people's lives. And I certainly want to thank the both of you for your impact and the indelible mark you have left on this organization, because we don't get to where we're at without both of you, and then certainly some others, but you two very specifically have had huge impact. Sometimes you keep telling me things I don't want to do, and you are persistent, and then I do, and Oscar is in a little different way, that same kind of thing. And so I truly believe you do it from a point of view of caring. And it's just not your ego. It's to help us be in a better spot. So I appreciate that very much.
No worries. Thank you. I've learned a lot.
Any final words either one of you have today? This has been excellent.
The one that, and you've heard me say this before, Pat, but if there is something we need to be doing in our messaging to the employees, it is that the one concern I do have is that it is very easy to be hired into this organization and assume this is the way construction happens around the country, and not spending enough time talking about how unique this is and how immense the opportunities are for people to come into this organization, because you have a better chance of, if you're half attentive and interested and somewhat inquisical, this is a place you can grow to things you never ever thought you could become.
Any final words?
I wrote this about a month ago, actually, and I didn't realize what I was writing. I wrote the past. I can't remember how it came up, but I wrote the past as an experiment. And I think that's a really important, I never used to think like that. So last time I was here was an experiment. We learned something. This next 2 weeks, we've got a plan and we'll follow the plan, but it's an experiment. We're not quite sure what's going to come out of it. And I think as long as I think that's really important to maintain that view.
The combination of an experiment and a hypothesis.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's always either one or the other, and if it's a hypothesis, you experiment to see whether that's correct, and if it's experiment, you eventually come up with a hypothesis.
Yep, yeah, around we go.
Yeah. So, guys, my final thought is so Mike and I taught the first session of Class 6 of the Story Leadership Program, and that's a seven session program we've done now for over 6 years. And this is the first time the recent acquisition of the folks in Sioux City with L&L, and half of the class, so 8 folks from Sioux City, and there's 8 folks here from Ames. And although we've had other people participate in it, we've never had kind of story people who are completely brand new, who all have come from a 1.0 world together, and then have them jump into the way we do what we do. And I was impressed with their attentiveness, the degree to which they're involved, and generally the energy that you could feel from the group as the day went, to where they started to talk a little bit more honestly or with all of the facts as the day went about just what reality looked like, and it wasn't about judgment. It was this is what it is, and so I think I'm excited to see. Now that we know what we know, what's the ability for us to increase the pace at which it can happen within folks who are eager, and we've got an eager group up there. So and you'll get to meet a number of the same folks here at the end of the week, Oscar, as Mike met yesterday, and so I guess what were your impressions of?
Well, I thought it was. It surprised me that they've got a little bit more than their toe in the water. I mean, there's a couple projects that have actually gone full cycle. But the conversations, the use of the terminology, and the acceptance of the sort of underlying culture as to how we are to behave and why the behavior enhances the production system that is designed to grow that kind of behavior, I found very encouraging.
So you guys are getting better at getting people started in this stuff.
So. Yes. Yep.
Which is good.
And we're
learn by doing.
They are. I think they're much better at knowing who the people need to be on the first project, so that it has a high degree of possibility of being successful without a bunch of JR required.
Yeah, sure.
And the program.
But you say without a bunch of JR, one of the foundations is make best use of each person's ability.
Right.
So what you guys are getting better at is identifying who's going to be the drivers of this stuff.
Right.
Make best use of their
and
ability.
who are going to be most likely to accept it early on and
Absolutely.
become role models for the rest of their organization. And this was probably 30, 40 years ago. I remember seeing Edward Deming. I went to a conference he was holding in Charlotte, and he was talking about his 14 points. And I'm not sure I got the exact order, but no less than 2 or 3 in the top 14 is to, first of all, have a constancy of purpose, and second was to drive out fear. And I never really understood the relationship of those, but now we have got 12, 15 projects ongoing that are all doing this fundamentally the same, and we're doing the best we can to make people, to facilitate those environments in such a way that people that have heretofore been hit over the head if they say anything, like in a typical project environment, or who are never asked asked of what they think should happen in terms of how their work gets done. You cannot have low tech and high collaboration for very long if you still have an organization full of fear.
Yeah, very cool. Collaboration.
That is become so evident to me now that it's like one of Jimmy Buffett's songs where he says it was so simple it pure evaded me.
Well, I think Jimmy Buffett is a fantastic way to end the session. So, guys, appreciate your time. Thank you much.
Thank you.